The hammer struck the anvil in a steady rhythm, sparks dancing like fireflies in the dim light of the smithy. Samuel Washington wiped the sweat from his forehead with his calloused hand and examined the horseshoe he was shaping. Perfect. In 20 years of slavery, he had mastered his craft, but now, in 1866, every blow of the hammer was his own choice. Mr. Washington?" came a hesitant voice from the doorway. Samuel looked up and saw the silhouette of a thin boy against the Colorado sun. The boy was no more than 15 years old, covered in wounds on his elbows and knees, with sandy hair that needed a trim, and clothes that had seen better days. "How can I help you, son?" The boy took a step forward, his face reddening. I wanted to ask if you needed a helper, sir." Samuel lowered his hammer. In the 6 months since he had opened his smithy in Millbrook, he had managed on his own, but the work was becoming too much for one man. However, hiring an assistant meant taking on additional responsibility. "What's your name, boy?" Timothy Hartwell, sir, but most people call me Tim." "Where's your family, Tim?" The boy's shoulders slumped. "I don't have a family anymore. My dad died in the war, and my mom, she said she couldn't feed another mouth. She told me to find my own way." Samuel's heart ached. He knew what it was like to be unwanted, to search for a place in a world that didn't care whether you lived or died. But at least he had papers that gave him his freedom. This boy had nothing but the clothes on his back, and a stutter that made even simple conversation a challenge. "Have you ever worked with metal?" No, sir, but I'm strong for my size and a quick learner." Samuel looked at the boy's serious face and saw hope flickering like a candle flame in the wind. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "All right, Tim, you can sleep in the loft above the workshop. I'll teach you the trade, but you'll work hard and do everything I tell you. Is that understood?" The boy's face lit up brighter than the fire in the forge. "Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Washington." Over the next few weeks, Tim proved himself to be a diligent and determined student. His stutter made communication difficult, but Samuel learned to be patient and give the boy time to get his words out. In return, Tim absorbed every lesson like a sponge, and with each passing day, his hands became more confident with the tools. The work suited them both. In the smithy, words were not as important as skill and understanding. They developed a rhythm. Samuel worked on the large pieces, while Tim did the small work, prepared the blanks, and kept the fire going. The boy's stutter seemed less noticeable when he was focused on his work, but not everyone in Millbrook approved of their partnership. "Don't sit there," Jake Crawford muttered to his drinking buddies at Murphy's Saloon. "A Negro is teaching a white boy. It's against the natural order of things." Crawford had served in the Confederate cavalry during the war and had not come to terms with the new reality. He had lost his farm in Georgia and moved west with others like him, who wore their grievances as badges of honor. "Something needs to be done about this," agreed Pete Dawson, another Confederate veteran. "This boy is still young. He can be reformed." Their grumbling might have remained just talk, but Samuel's success annoyed them. His horseshoes were the best in 3 counties. His plowshares were sharp and precise. Farmers and miners alike sought him out, and with every satisfied customer, his reputation grew. One evening, as Samuel and Tim were closing up the workshop, 3 men approached the smithy. Crawford led the group, his face hard as granite. "Washington," he shouted, "we need to talk." Samuel stepped forward, placing himself between the men and Tim. "The workshop is closed, Crawford. Come back tomorrow if you want a job." "This isn't about a job," Crawford growled, spitting into the dust. "This is about the boy who works for you. A white boy shouldn't have to take orders from a Negro." "Tim is my apprentice," Samuel replied evenly. "He's learning an honest trade." "That's the problem," Crawford said, his hand reaching for the gun on his hip. "The boy needs to know his place, just like you." Behind Samuel, Tim's breathing quickened. The boy had never seen real violence, but he could feel it in the air like smoke. "Go, Mr. Washington," Tim whispered. "I'll be fine." Samuel turned slightly. "No, son. We'll stick together." Crawford laughed harshly. "Touching. But this town doesn't need your influence. You have until tomorrow evening to close up shop and leave. Take the boy with you or leave him here. We don't care." The three men walked away, their heels clicking ominously on the wooden planks of the boardwalk. That evening, Tim found Samuel sitting by the blacksmith's forge, staring up at the stars. "You don't have to leave because of me," Tim said quietly. "It's not about you, son. People like Crawford, they can't stand to see a freed slave prosper. It reminds them too much of what they lost. But this is your home now, your business." Samuel nodded. "I built it with my own hands, every piece of it, but I won't risk your safety or mine for the sake of pride." "What if we stay? What if we fight?" Samuel looked at the boy in surprise. "Tim, these people won't hesitate to use violence. They've killed before, in the war, maybe, and since. There are only two of us against an unknown number of people." "But we're not alone," Tim said, his stutter less noticeable because of his sincerity. "Mrs. Henderson comes here for horseshoes. Mr. Patterson needs plowshares. The whole town depends on this smithy." Samuel wanted to share the boy's optimism, but he knew from experience what it meant to rely on others. Nevertheless, looking at Tim's determined face, he felt something stir in his chest. Not quite hope, but something like it. The next day, a stream of customers filed into the smithy, but their faces were tense. News of Crawford's ultimatum had spread throughout the town. Some, like old Mrs. Henderson, made a point of praising Samuel's work loudly. Others avoided eye contact, hurrying to finish their business, as if talking to him could bring trouble. Towards evening, Samuel began to dampen the fire in the forge. He made up his mind. At first light, they would head west to California, where an experienced blacksmith could find work without encountering the hostility of the Confederates. Then he heard voices from the street. A crowd of maybe 20 people had gathered. Samuel's heart skipped a beat, but then he realized they had no torches or weapons. At the front stood Mrs. Henderson, her emaciated face full of determination. Next to her stood Thomas Patterson, the largest farmer in the valley, and Murphy from the saloon. "Good evening, Samuel," Patterson greeted him. "I hear you're having some trouble." Before Samuel could reply, Crawford and his men appeared from the opposite direction. They had clearly expected to find the smithy empty and were surprised by the crowd. "What's going on here?" Crawford asked. "Citizens of Millbrook," Patterson replied calmly. "We've come to let the blacksmith know that he's welcome here." Crawford's face darkened. "This is none of your business, Patterson." "This concerns all of us," Mrs. Henderson interjected sharply. "Samuel Washington is the best blacksmith in this town. My husband's horses never lost a horseshoe made by Samuel. My late husband would have whipped anyone who tried to drive away a good craftsman." "The woman is right," Murphy added. "Samuel's business brings people to town. They buy goods, eat at my place, stay at the inn. If you drive him away, you'll hurt all of us." Crawford looked around at the crowd, clearly not expecting such support. "You don't understand. This isn't about business. It's about keeping order." At that moment, Tim stepped forward. Samuel reached for the boy's hand, but Tim gently pulled away. The crowd fell silent as the young apprentice looked straight at Crawford. Mr. Crawford," Tim began, stammering even more under the pressure of all those eyes. "I don't know much about war, politics, or the proper order of things, but I know what it's like to be unwanted." He paused, swallowing hard, then continued with growing strength. "My own mother threw me out because I was just a mouth to feed. She said I wasn't worth taking care of because of the way I talk. But Mr. Washington saw something in me that was worth saving. He taught me a trade and gave me a purpose in life." The crowd listened intently, as Tim's voice grew stronger. "You say there's an order to life. Well, maybe the right order is that a man who works hard and treats people fairly deserves respect, no matter the color of his skin. Maybe the right order is that we judge people by their character, not their background." Tim's voice trembled slightly, but he continued. "Mr. Washington never asked me to fight for him. He would probably have preferred me to keep quiet and stay safe. But I can't do that. This man saved my life, and this forge is our home. If you want to destroy it, you'll have to go through all of us." The silence that followed was broken by Mrs. Henderson's firm voice. "The boy is right. Samuel Washington has earned his place here." "Earned and more," Patterson agreed. Murphy nodded. "Anyone who has a problem with Samuel has a problem with me." One by one, the rest of the crowd expressed their agreement. Crawford looked around at the determined faces, and his own supporters suddenly seemed very small and lonely. "This isn't over," Crawford muttered, but he had no spirit left to fight. In the face of united opposition from the most influential citizens of the city, his threat rang hollow. When the crowd dispersed, Samuel put his hand on Tim's shoulder. "That was brave, son. Foolish, perhaps, but brave." Tim smiled. "You taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're afraid." "When did I teach you that?" "Every day," Tim replied simply. "Just by being who you are." The following week, Crawford and his followers left Millbrook, unable to find support for their cause in a town that valued skill and character over prejudice. The smithy prospered, and Tim's reputation as an apprentice grew along with his self-confidence. Years later, when Tim had mastered his craft and opened his own blacksmith shop in Denver, people asked him about his mentor. Tim told them about Samuel Washington, the freed slave who had become not only a master of his craft, but also a teacher of courage. And sometimes, when the hammer struck the anvil in that perfect rhythm they had learned together, Tim could almost hear Samuel's voice, reminding him that every blow was a choice to build rather than destroy, to unite rather than divide, to see the best in people rather than the worst. Tim realized that the Forge of Courage was not built of iron and fire, but of understanding and respect between two people who had found a family in an unexpected place. And that was the strongest foundation of all.